Great. Okay, so, oh, thanks. That's great. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and you are all very welcome to our fourth seminar in our Innovations in Child and Family Health seminar series of 2023. Our presenter today is Dr. Eleanor Hollywood. Eleanor is an associate professor in children's nursing here in the School of Nursing and Midwifery in Trinity College. My name is Tracey O'Neill, and I'll be chairing the seminar today. So during this session, Eleanor will explore a variety of participatory techniques that can be used with school-age children for the purposes of collecting research data. Eleanor will also discuss the benefits, the challenges that are associated with participatory research techniques and some practical issues that might, that need to be considered when collecting research data with school-age children. So if you have any questions or comments for Eleanor, we'd love to hear them. And if you wouldn't mind popping them into the chat function, and Eleanor will address them at the end of the seminar. So without any further delay, I'm delighted to invite Eleanor to commence her presentation.
Thank you very much, Tracey, but I know that you're going to help me with any answering of questions that's going to go on at the end as well, in addition to your chairing responsibilities. So thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado, I will commence this presentation on participatory research techniques with school-age children. And as Tracey has said, I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you might have at the end, or indeed any comments as well. And also, just to say now before I forget, if any of you joining today have some of your own participatory techniques that you would like to share with me, I would be really interested in hearing that also. So learning from one another is the key. Okay, so first of all, just to give you an overview of this presentation, if I can move on to the next slide. Oh, here we go. Okay. So without further ado, here is a quick overview of this session. So first and foremost, I'm going to speak a little bit about childhood, and I suppose how childhood has changed over the past few decades. Then I will look briefly at children's rights and how we can ensure that the rights of the child are respected and of course upheld during the research process. I'll mention some ethical considerations that we need to be mindful of when conducting research with children, and I will then present a variety of participatory techniques that I have used and also that I'm currently using on a few different research projects. I'm going to talk about the benefits of the various techniques and of course some of the challenges as well that have arisen with these techniques, because challenges do occur. They're part and parcel of it. Participatory techniques, they're really useful. Of course, they're very fun for children to do, but as researchers, I guess we need to be mindful of analysis and how we can actually analyze the information that we yield from these techniques. So I'm also going to look at this aspect of research, I suppose, with school-aged children. And then I am going to conclude with some pointers that I really hope will be useful for you if you are currently conducting research with children, or perhaps if you are about to embark on the journey of conducting research with school-aged children. So the concept of childhood, it has evolved radically in the past 100 years. And not only has childhood as a concept changed, but the way in which children live their lives have also changed. And of course, that change has been really significant, especially in the past 3 to 4 decades. The lives of children and our expectations of what childhood should actually look like, they have been utterly transformed. Gray, Gerhi and Ralph, they explain in their book Family Rhythms that there's been a long-term shift in the social meaning and experiences of childhood. So we might ask ourselves, well, what has instigated this evolution of childhood, its meaning, how childhood is experienced for children? And of course, the answer to that is really multifaceted. First of all, children's position within society has changed. And of course, we know this because there is a greater understanding about children's lives. There's a greater understanding now in general about what children need in order to thrive. And consequently, there's greater emphasis on children and childhood within society. Second of all, as well, children's roles within the family have changed. Children are now listened to, their views are respected. The days of seen and not heard are gone. Families, of course, and family life has changed dramatically also in the past 3 to 4 decades. Children are growing up in more diverse families. They have more diverse family formations. If you think of decades ago, many women would have stayed at home to look after children, whereas today many women work, children go to childcare. It's more common for children to have their fathers caring for them as stay-at-home dads. And of course, the role of fathers as well within the family has also changed. I think if we think in general terms, fathers in general are more involved now in rearing of children than they would have been, say, 50 years ago. So family life is really different now to what it would have been a long time ago. And of course, it's really important when it comes to childhood, I think, to mention technology, because technology has influenced childhood. The development of technology, which has really accelerated since the 90s, has also contributed to some of the changes that have taken place in relation to childhood. Children, as we know, they now live their lives with the impact of technology on their social world, their emotional world, and of course, their psychological world. So these are all but a few of a number of factors that have contributed to the evolution and the development of childhood as we know it today. The recognition and development of children's rights has had a significant impact on childhood and societal views of children and childhood itself. In 1989, Ireland ratified the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, the principles of which are to improve the lives of children and to safeguard future generations. Then in the year 2000 in Ireland, the government published the National Children's Strategy, and this was really significant to the lives of children in Ireland. The National Children's Strategy, as you all probably know, it focuses on improving the lives of children in Ireland. And prior to this, it's important to remember that there wasn't really any concrete policy that focused on children's well-being, so it really was a significant move from government. These are really the beginnings, I suppose, in relation to addressing child health and child well-being and upholding children's rights from a government perspective in Ireland, as they also served as the basis for many child health and well-being policies that have been developed and, of course, published since then. So moving on then to research with children, well, children have things to say and they do want to be heard. This is something that we currently know and we also understand. If you have read any of the latest publications on research and children, you'll already be aware of the move from research on children to research with children. Of course, the concept of research with children, it can take on a few different meanings depending on what point of the research process is the child or the children involved in and to what extent. Conducting research with children is different from conducting research with adults, and this is particularly true when we consider data collection from child participants. There are a number of issues that need to be considered before, during, and after data collection with child participants, and I'm going to explore some of these on my next slide. However, before we move on to the next slide, I would like you to think about the power dynamic and often imbalance that can exist between adults and children. Now, this is something that you might have experienced and remembered from when you were a child yourself, or it might be something that you notice in your work with children. As a practitioner working with children and families, you will be aware of the power imbalance that can and often does exist for a variety of reasons. And you also probably have a set of tools available to you to help even out this power dynamic. As a researcher, it's really important to be aware of power dynamics, as if not handled correctly, it can have a negative impact on the child, the researcher, and of course the research itself, which we want to avoid. Here on the screen, you'll see an overview of some of the core principles for conducting research with children. It's important to consider all potential risks or harms, and these need to be considered within the context of your research. You might not recognize all of the potential risks or harms yourself. Therefore, it's a good idea to discuss these in the context of your research with other researchers, colleagues, and team members. And this is something that we, myself and Tracey, spend a lot of time actually doing this, trying to figure out, especially when you're applying for ethics, what can be the potential risk or harm? What do we really want to avoid? What is it in the context of this research, of our research question, and what we want to find out? We need informed consent from the parents to conduct research. However, you also need the assent of the child. And this is really essential. And it's also essential that the child understands why the research is being conducted, and equally important that they understand why they have been invited to participate in the research. So an assent form is a really good idea, and it affirms the child's understanding and assent to participate. And of course, as well as that, we want to be mindful that children do not feel coerced to participate, that they are participating voluntarily themselves and they are happy to do so. So the assent of the child is really, really key. Confidentiality and anonymity. Don't think that children don't understand these concepts, because they do when they are explained to them in language that is appropriate to their developmental age. Develop a child information sheet to help explain your study and give time for the child to ask questions. So again, this is something that we have found really useful, using our information sheet, pointing at the pictures, usually a pictorial one, and giving our explanations to help children understand the concepts of confidentiality and anonymity as being part of the research. Of course, child protection rules. All members of the research team do need to have Garda vetting, children's first training, and good research integrity training. So have a protocol in place to deal with any issues that can happen or that potentially could arise. And this is something actually that many tender applications are looking for nowadays as well. GDPR regulations and other legal obligations need to be adhered to. And of course, a child-centered approach to the research is very much required when conducting research with children. Of course, how is that achieved is the question. So having a child-centered approach to research is important when conducting research with children, as I've already said. And on the screen here, you can see the Lundy model of child participation, which incorporates the elements of space, voice, influence, and audience. The Lundy model, developed by Professor Laura Lundy in Queen's, speaks to Article 12 of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, which is about children having the right to express their views and having those views given due weight. So if we look here on the screen at the minute, when we're looking at space, for example, children need to be given safe, inclusive opportunities to inform and express their views. Let's look at voice and think about voice for a minute. Children must be facilitated to express their views. And I guess this is where our participatory techniques come in. What participatory techniques will really help to get the child's voice out there and help them to say what they think. If we look at audience down here on the left-hand side, the view must be listened to. So it's not enough to get the view, the child's view has to be listened to as well. How can we achieve that? And if we look at influence over here on the right-hand side, the child's view must be acted upon as appropriate. So data collection methods that are informed, I suppose, by the Lundy model will help to ensure a child-centered approach to the research. So from a practical perspective, and as a researcher, you need to think about the actioning of these. Ask yourself, how do I ensure that the child feels safe and included to express what they feel and what they think? Do I do that through developing a rapport with the child before data collection? Do I do that by creating a safe space where the child can be and take part in whatever techniques we choose? Do I do that by thinking about the type of environment that I have for my actual data collection? Good lighting, good seating, is it warm, privacy? All of these things feed into it. How do I ensure that the participating child can be facilitated to express their views? So what participatory techniques will I choose? What are suitable? What are suitable for my research question? What do I already know about my population of child participants? What's going to be suitable for this particular population? These are all the questions that you need to consider. How can I ensure that the participating child will be listened to? So yeah, I get the information, but how will I actually ensure that they will be listened to? How can I make sure that the views of my child participants will be acted upon? Each of the elements of space, voice, audience, and influence, they span across the research process and not just at any one particular time point. It's really important to remember this, especially if you want to use a model like this. As a researcher, you need to keep these in mind throughout the research project in order to keep your project child-centered. Now, it's important that the researcher thinks about creative and novel ways to ensure that their research is child-centered and, of course, cognizant of the participating child and children. I devised a traffic light system, as you can see here on the screen. I did this when I was preparing to collect data via face-to-face interviews with children from disadvantaged communities. The interviews with the children, they were about health and well-being experiences and perceptions of the children. And this involved asking children about their family and about their health and well-being practices. The reason that I developed this traffic light system was because I wanted to ensure that children had a non-verbal means of bringing the interview to a halt, which would be a red traffic light, as you can see here on the right, or if they did not want to answer a particular question. And then, of course, they would have the option of moving the interview along, which would be the green light when they are ready to proceed. So this system worked really well because it facilitates the child to have a little bit more control over the interview and over what is discussed and what is not discussed. So this is, I think, really critical because a lot of the time we devise interview schedules based, of course, on the project and what we want to find out. But, you know, the interview schedules might not always be suitable for children, or as well as that, the interview schedules sometimes can be along the agenda of the researcher rather than the child. So I think it's really important that they don't have to answer any questions that they don't want to answer, or indeed any questions that they don't feel comfortable answering. So that is the traffic light system. We've used these actually in a number of projects and they have worked really well. And of course, because, you know, traffic light's a common system, children understand it. They also see it in school for various other activities, so they understand it very well. Here on the screen, you can see a genogram in the formation of a spider diagram drawing by a child aged 8 years old. So the child in this particular drawing, they're describing their family composition, who makes up their family. And this is all combined into their spider diagrams. You can see they've got their brother, their granny, their granddad, their dad, their mum, and their sister. So a genogram, it's a really useful tool that enables the gathering of very complex family information. However, like all participatory techniques, its success is really dependent on the process adopted for the technique rather than the technique alone. So it's important when you introduce any type of drawing activity like a genogram that it is explained to the child and that they understand the concept and what is being asked of them to do. A genogram, it's one type of drawing participatory activity that can be done with children. Of course, there's a whole host of other ones, and we'll look at some more in a minute. One thing I guess to remember about drawing activities, because there are lots and lots of drawing activities that you can do as participatory techniques, but it's important to remember that drawing as a technique itself, it's really useful in particular for school-age children. When combined with interview. And the reason being is because it serves as a good springboard, first of all, to get the interview underway. And then, of course, as well as that, the act of drawing gives the child time to consider what they think and how they feel about the topic at hand. Drawing is also considered a child-centered method since children are familiar with drawing in school and at home. It's also considered a very good conduit for children to express how they feel about a particular topic or issue. However, just as a caveat, you will meet children who don't like to draw. And of course, that needs to be taken into consideration as well. And I think having a backup plan for children who don't want to actually engage in drawing, that are not interested in drawing, is probably a good idea. We assume all children want to draw, but they don't. The next one here, this is another drawing activity, and it's called My Family Drawing, and this was done by a child age 11. So the My Family Drawing allows the child to include whoever they see as being part of their family in their drawing. And when combined with interview, the roles and relationships within the family can be explored in greater depth, as you can see from the transcript excerpt here on the top left-hand side. So in this drawing called My Family, the child was asked to draw their family. And as you can see, the child has himself in it, the mum, the dad, the nana, and they have the granddad who they've put up higher here because he has passed away. So in the interview, Bobby says, when he's asked who this person is, he says, it's my mum's dad. He died, but like, I still consider him like as a family member. And the researcher says, yeah, what was he like? Oh, he was very nice. He used to collect me from school. So this was a very nice way for him to be able to include everybody who he saw as being part of his family, irrespective of being alive or not. And actually from this research, which was my PhD research, many children include deceased family members. They also included non-blood related family members and even pets in their family drawings. So this drawing technique, it highlights, I guess, the significance of family members as seen through the eyes of the child, and really how children define their families through the relationships that they have rather than through blood ties, in particular in the other drawings where other family members were included. It's a freer drawing technique than the genogram drawing, and the process of its introduction as well differs slightly to the genogram drawing. This is another drawing activity that I devised to do with children for health and well-being and their perceptions of health and well-being and what they do to maintain their health. And it's called the time pie drawing. This particular one here is done by an 11-year-old child. So children were asked to draw a circular pie, which would represent a typical day from when they got up in the morning right through to going to bed at night. They were asked then to divide their day into sections. Each section would represent how they spend their time. So larger sections or slices of the pie, as would be explained to them, would represent more significant segments of time, and smaller slices would represent smaller segments of time in any ordinary given day in their particular life. This technique is useful to get information about everyday life when combined with interview. However, like all other participatory techniques, its success is dependent on the process adopted for the technique rather than the technique alone. So with something like this, it's a little bit more complex. It's important that children understand the concept behind it and that they are encouraged to think of their full day. So if you look at this particular one, this child has really incorporated everything. They have school, time that they spend on their laptop, time spent getting ready for school. This little girl was getting ready for school and straightening her hair and doing different things, homework, cleaning, sleeping, going to a friend's house, going out, and television. And also you can see how television and laptop, for example, different types of screen activities are included in this time pie. Here on the screen now, you can see a mapping activity with traffic light stickers, so more traffic lights. So mapping is another participatory technique that can be really useful with children, and many school-age children in particular, I suppose, because they would be used to doing types of mapping activities in school. So here in this particular mapping activity that I'm doing with children, I'm doing this with children who are staying in refuge with their mothers as a result of escaping domestic abuse and violence. And basically, I'm trying to find out what the children think about the facilities that are available to them at this particular refuge, and what they think about the child-orientated program that is offered to children when they are in refuge. So this particular refuge where this project is going on, they offer a children's program, and they try and facilitate children by having a playroom for them and an outside play area. And they want to know what children think of the facilities that they have available to them. There hasn't really been an awful lot of work done, I think, in relation to children in refuge. So this is a very exciting project. It's kind of one of the first times that children have been asked about what it's like to actually be in refuge and out of your own home. So for this particular study, I pre-prepared maps based on the facilities that are available to children at the refuge. So I have a map for the playroom, as you can see here on the screen. So this is the playroom map. I also have a map for the outdoor play area and other areas that the children use within the refuge itself. Children are asked to place a green traffic light sticker on the areas that they think work well, an orange one on the areas that they think could be improved, and a red sticker on the areas do not work very well. And then I interview the child face to face and we talk about their sticker allocation as they have placed on the map. So this is just a mock-up one that I have done. So say like a red sticker placed on the TV, that this doesn't work well for whatever reason, green on the table, on the dollhouse, etc. So the map is just as the playroom is set out, the playroom that they get to use. Now, one thing that I've learned about this particular participatory technique, though, is that children are very loyal. So all of the children that I've interviewed to date, and I think I've probably about 10 of them so far, they all go to a lot of detail to tell me how much they like all of the workers in the refuge and how kind everybody is to them, and how child orientated is, which is really good. But as a result, they've been very reluctant to put in red stickers. And this is something I noticed, I suppose, after the first 2 or 3 interviews. I think they felt that the red stickers was criticism of the refuge, and they didn't want to do that. So children really are very loyal. So I've had to take some extra time at the beginning when I'm introducing this technique as to why one would put in a red sticker, and it's about helping children in the future and about developing the playroom and the facilities that are available so that children are encouraged a little bit more to allocate a red sticker, because prior to this, they haven't been overly keen on giving a red sticker, which is interesting. Here I've got draw, map and stick. So this activity is called draw, map and stick. And this particular one is by an 8-year-old child. So this is another mapping participatory technique. But in this one, the child draws the map and then allocates the sticker. And again, it's a red sticker, orange sticker and a green sticker. So in this project, we are asking children who have type 1 diabetes, and we're asking them about how their condition is looked after and managed while they're in the primary school environment. So the child has drawn their classroom. In this particular one, the child has drawn their classroom, and in their interview, they explain where they go to have their insulin injection and who helps them during the day. They also explain how they feel about having their condition managed while at school. For this particular technique, children need more time for this because the drawing, the map and deciding what areas of the school they should include takes more time for children to decide upon. So it takes a little bit longer because the child has to decide what sections of the school are going to be included in their map, what is relevant for the management of their diabetes. And then they also have to decide who they want to include in their map as well. So if you see over here on the left-hand side, the child has drawn a syringe and they've put a red sticker on it. And this has actually come up a few times in a few maps that some of the children have done, that they're not happy basically with where they're getting their injections while they're at school. And again, in due course, we're still gathering data from this, so we haven't done any concrete analysis. But I would be confident that going forward, I think that privacy is going to be an issue for children who have type 1 diabetes in school in relation to their care, because it is something that has come up on a number of occasions now. So again, a nice activity for children to do. This particular child has a lot of stickers on their pals and gave us a lot of detail as to how their pals helped them in school also. So again, a good activity to do with children. You get a lot of information, but you do need to be mindful that it takes a little bit more time to execute. And here is another one that we have. So this one is an adaptation of The Wheel by O'Connell et al. 2015. I've put their reference at the end of this. So I came across this when I was basically trying to think of participatory techniques to do for a project that we had relating to a playground service and an evaluation of a playground service. So this participatory technique involves a pre-printed sheet containing 4 key questions. And in this case, the questions relate to a play service that the participating children attend. The questions, they focus on the service and the ethos of the service. So one of the questions is what I don't, or one of the prompts or questions you could say, what I like about being here, what's good, what I don't like about being here, what's bad, what I would like to change here, and how I should have my say. So the questions focus on the service and the ethos of the service. It is then combined with an individual face-to-face interview that explores the children's answers. So I found this technique to be very valuable to facilitate children's voice and to keep the child interview focused on the topic at hand, I should say. That's one thing you will notice about interviewing children of school age. Sometimes they can go off topic or off piste a little bit, or if something else grabs their attention. I particularly like this technique because it keeps them very, very focused on the question and what we actually want to find out. It is important, however, to remember that when using a technique like this that involves writing, the children that you reassure the children, I should say, that they don't need to worry about spelling, or you can help them along if they wish. So that's definitely something that has come up in this. As you see, they are writing their answers here, and then we have the interview and we talk about their answers, but not all of the children are confident in their handwriting. This has come up, I think, across a number of different projects. So again, so the children don't feel pressurized or don't feel demoralized, it's really important to reiterate to them not to worry about spelling, offer to help with spelling if they want, or sometimes as well, I offer to actually do the writing for children if I really think that they don't feel confident enough to do the writing themselves. What's interesting about this particular project is we collected data from 18 children. If you see this section here, this is a really strong finding that has come out of this. What I don't like about being here, what's bad. Literally every single one of the children said nothing. There was nothing that they didn't like. They loved the service so much. There was nothing bad about being there, which I think our funders will be very happy to find out about when they receive their final report. It's a true compliment from the children who attend the service that they all said there was nothing that they did not like about being in the service. They loved it so much. Again, if you have a child who I suppose isn't keen on the writing and also doesn't want you to write, it might be a good idea to have an alternative. We would have had an alternative in some projects in the form of collage, as well as that some children are more visual and creative when it comes to collage than having to do a task orientated one that requires writing like this particular one. So I think offering an alternative is also something that is worthwhile considering, and considering it earlier on so that you can get it in on your ethics application as well. So that's just some of the participatory techniques that we have used to date. I've also used another activity. I didn't have it on the slides here, but it's a task-based one called Pots and Beans. And again, it's an activity that actually has worked really, really well. If any of you might have read about the Pots and Beans activity already, it's almost not a million miles from a Likert scale where you give children 3 or 4 marbles. One is agree, strongly agree, or disagree, agree, strongly agree. So give them 3 marbles, and then you have pots that represent different things. So I have done this activity, Pots and Beans one, and I've based it on the Lundy model. So I'm just looking at the pots here. I've got making decisions, being here, and being heard. And again, it's asking the children, do you feel heard when you're here? If you have something to say, are people listening to you? If you need to find something out, do you know who to go to? And they allocate their beans into the pots. And then of course they elaborate on their answers. So there are many, many different participatory techniques that can be used. Again, you just need to think of the age of the child who's participating in the research, and also the research question, what exactly is it that you want to find out? So, of course, it's important to mention data analysis. Having all of these creative and fun participatory techniques is very lovely, but what do we do when it comes to analysis? How can the data yielded from these techniques be incorporated into the analysis? I have used and I'm currently using NVivo version 20. You can see a snippet from one of my NVivo databases here on the screen. What I would typically do is I scan all of the artwork, so whether that be collages, drawings, task-orientated drawings, or maps, I scan them and I put them into the database, and then I code the artwork against the interview transcripts or indeed against the interview audio. Coding, you can see here on the screen, sorry, that I have coded against a transcript, but if your project doesn't allow for transcripts, so you don't have funds for transcribing, you can actually code a piece of artwork against audio as well. Now it takes a little bit longer, I suppose, when you want to do your results. If you want to, you might have to type out the answers, but it still works very, very well. Here on this screen, you can see how I've coded the child's drawing against an interview transcript. It helps to give more depth to the findings, but it also allows you as a researcher greater options when it comes to presenting your findings. So the visual, in addition to the text, I think is very powerful. And also, well, I suppose NVivo, because I like NVivo so much, but NVivo will also let you look at, I suppose, different themes that that you develop as a result of all of the information you put in. And you can also create visuals of where those themes are coming from. So especially if you've got a mix of data, say from adults and from children, you can see what are the children saying and what are the adults saying. And then you can also see that visualized through children's drawings. So I do think it's really nice for the findings and just gives a little bit more depth. So qualitative participatory techniques work well when combined with interview. However, there are also a few techniques that can be used in isolation, but I think that's a story for another day. So to conclude, try and always keep your research child-centered. Think of the child as being the main person, the main player in this. Remember your research question. So what is your research question? What are your aims and your objectives? What exactly are you setting out to find out about? Have you considered tried and tested techniques? Okay, you can come up with new techniques yourself, but maybe there's something out there that's tried and tested that has worked well. Speak with other colleagues. If any of you are developing techniques and you want to talk to me or Tracey about our experiences, you should get in touch with other people, because it's definitely through talking to other people that you find out if techniques are going to work and what are the challenges going to be. I personally go to primary school teachers a lot to ask them about, if I'm developing something new, to ask them if they think it'll work. I feel that primary school teachers, when they're working with school age children day in, day out, they know if a set of instructions will be understood easily or not by children. So I definitely find that that is useful. Again, consider your population and what their experiences might or might not have been to date. Consider how will you analyze. So how are you going to use this data, or how are you going to analyze the data that you yield? A lot of the participatory techniques probably don't stand alone. They probably need an interview with them. However, there are some quick ones, like we have a handprint evaluation, for example, for teenage children that works very well and can be analysed alone on its own. Give choice if possible. I do think this is something that needs to be considered, because we can't assume that all children are the same, because obviously they're not. Not all children will like to draw and not all children will like collage. So giving choice. Actually, speaking of collage as well, if you are doing collage with children, I haven't included the collages here today, but we have collages on another project as well, thinking about the types of materials that you offer children within your collage. I would recommend avoiding the use of letters, because we had letters included in one of our collage packs and children started using those letters to put their names on their collages, which is a bit of a problem when it comes to, well, it's not a problem, but it's extra work when it comes to anonymizing the data. So I would avoid the use of letters. Also, we have included some arts and crafts for the collage that have gone down really well, for example, pipe cleaners, and then other ones that haven't gone down as well, for example, coloured lollipop sticks. So there are different things. Try and give choice with your techniques. And of course, all participatory techniques need to have a rationale. Sometimes the excitement of developing something new can lead you a little bit astray. Come back to your rationale. Why am I including this technique? What is it going to find out for me? Will it really help to facilitate children's voice? Or what is the actual point of it? So again, these are just some pointers that I would recommend. And that brings me to the end. There's some references of what I've incorporated today. And thank you all very much for listening. I really hope that that has been helpful. Back to you, Tracey.
Thank you, Eleanor. Sorry, my internet is having a little bit of problems there.
That's okay. Do you want me to stop sharing my screen or leave it?
No, it's fine. It's fine. If it cuts out, I'll stop my video, and it generally doesn't. But I don't know. Maybe today it knew I was having a presentation or chairing a presentation.
Yeah.
So I just invite anybody if they'd like to ask any questions, as we said, or make any comments. Someone commented that they're lovely, perfect drawings that you had up there. But look, we've got a lot of experience, I suppose, sitting with children and using these participatory techniques, and they can be very, very creative, for sure. So I suppose a question, Eleanor, the presentation is about school-age children, which I presume we're thinking of primary school between the ages of 5 and 6, maybe up to 11 or 12. I know I certainly have, but have you come across any, I suppose, differences between the very young and the very old, or any challenges that you might have come across, maybe?
Yeah, certainly. So today's presentation is about school-age children, which obviously typically will span between the ages of 5 and 6 up to kind of like 11, 12, or sometimes even 13, depending on when they start school. But within that, I think it's fair to say that we've definitely seen differences between, say, the 5, 6 and up to 8, and then say the 9 and onwards. I suppose with the younger children, I think trying to keep focus on interview. They're very good at the collages and the drawings. So once you explain the task to them, they're very good at that. I really like collage in particular for that particular age group, because it really relaxes them. It helps to build up rapport. Rapport will equal trust. You'll get more information. They'll feel more relaxed. It's very nice. And they're thinking about, not thinking about the researcher, but thinking about the task at hand, which that's really good for collage. But I also think in those younger children, when it comes to interview, they do go off piste a lot. And I know, Tracey, you've also experienced this, trying to get them back onto the topic at hand. So just something to be mindful about, I guess, when you do have that younger age group. So that's kind of the 5, 6, and 7, for example, possibly 8, depending on the maturity of the 8-year-old. And then, of course, with the 8-year-olds and onwards, 8, 9 and onwards, they're definitely more mature. It's easier for them to understand, straightforward with instructions. And of course, they're used to more structure and instructions at school as well. So again, just something to be mindful of. And also, actually, just to mention, some of the younger children also do like to have their parent present with them. I mean, for all children, we give them the option. It's always the option for the family, but the younger children in particular. And of course, all the children's nurses listening today will know that, because we know we like to keep children close to their parents at all times, as much as we possibly can. It's the same with research. So keeping the parent close if that's what the child wants, and by and large, the younger child will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a thought from my own, experience of interviewing children is to, even what the words that you're using when you're explaining. So I once said to a child about drawing up their insulin, and she was quite young, she was 6, and she sort of looked at me and she thought I was talking about drawing insulin. So it's just to be really mindful of even the words that you're using to explain that they have to, I suppose, mirror their developmental stage and what they can understand. It's really, really important.
That's exactly it. And that's one of the reasons as well why I've spoken to primary school teachers in particular, because even in the hospital environment, we're used to speaking in a certain way. Whereas when you're doing research, it's almost more, it feels, I think, more so like an activity that you'd be doing in school. And you'll remember as well from our research that we did conduct in schools, I think it's very similar to that. So that's why I've always brought my instructions and my information leaflet to a primary school teacher and said, like, listen, this is how I'm going to explain it. This, you know, for 6, 7, 8-year-old, will this be good? What do you think then about the older age group kids? Would it be good? Do I need to adjust my language? Do I need to have more mature language as well? So depending on the age of the child. So definitely, I would advocate people to speak to primary school teachers because I think they're a fountain of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had this question in from Amy, and Amy says, were there thoughts of using another color instead of red, say like purple maybe? So, you know, for the playroom, do you remember in your slide, it was, you talked about using the traffic light system, but maybe a color other than red?
Well, Amy, that's actually a very good suggestion that I will be taking on board, because I didn't initially, that was my first time using that technique, apart from using the traffic lights in interviews before. I think that's a really good suggestion, yeah. And maybe red is a little bit loaded, you know, on reflection now, perhaps it wasn't the best choice, and maybe a purple would be a better one. I suppose at the time, because I had used traffic lights before in a different context, and I'm thinking of the universality, is that the word, of traffic lights. That was why I went for it. But I think purple might definitely, if I was to do it again, yeah, I might take your idea, Amy, and use purple.
Yeah, that's actually something to think about.
It's a good suggestion, actually, isn't it?
A good suggestion, yeah, when we're thinking about it. Amy also said a wonderful presentation, and thank you. And
thanks very much.
Definitely like to echo that. It was very, very interesting. And you know, if there's anybody interested, as Eleanor said, in doing, you know, in research with children and using these participatory techniques, certainly, you know, get on to Eleanor or myself, and you know, there's always you know, we should always try and help one another, I suppose, when it comes to stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think learn from one another as well. And also, please, for everyone listening, watch out for our Twitter feeds, because we have some reports that are going to be published soon. We have some papers as well that we're just submitting, and they have a lot of this detail. We're trying to incorporate our participatory techniques in that to get the word out, because I think when you sit down to read about this, you really do need the visual to go along with the explanation. And then I think it's important to talk to people to ask about their experience of using participatory techniques, and that gives a better understanding of them as a whole and how to use them. So watch out in our Twitter feeds for our reports and our published papers.
Excellent. So we'll, I suppose, bring this to a close if there's no more questions, but there are some comments. Eleanor saying fantastic presentation, the work is very inspiring, well done. And you know, people are saying that it's been very helpful considering methods for studies for next year, and it's quite insightful. So thank you, Eleanor, well done. I know someone was looking for a copy of your slides also, so this is recorded actually, and it's going to be up on our website.
And we will put a copy of the slides too, because I've got some links there that might be useful to people, and any of the ones that don't, any of the examples that I've given that don't have a reference on them, they're just mock-ups that I did myself. But the rest of them, the ones with a reference, you will be able to find those online and via our Tara repository as well.
It'll be there too. Excellent.
Okay.
There is a final question, and from Veronica, about if there's any colleagues who are working with children and youth in tribal communities, but you can send us an email on that, and you know, if we can sort of put you in touch with anybody in relation to that, we will. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. Everyone has put in their
Oh, I think Tracey is after going into freeze mode. Her internet is letting her down. So I'll bring this to a conclusion. Thanks everybody for listening. And again, if anybody has any questions or want to get in touch, please do not hesitate. My email, as you can see here on the screen as well, you're more than welcome to email me, and please do follow me on Twitter. Thanks everybody for joining, and I wish you a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.